Hello, everyone. My name is Gregory, and this is The View from Out Here. Many years ago, I was out looking for things to take pictures of with my little 12 megapixel camera that I was so excited about. I was driving up Martin Luther King Boulevard when I spotted a dear friend with whom I had fallen deeply in love about a decade ago. He was hot and sweaty because it was about 90 degrees out, and he was carrying a rubber trash can over his shoulder. He was collecting bottles and cans to turn them in for money. That image seemed strangely fitting to me, him with that trash can. You see, my friend suffers from crack addiction, and he had it pretty bad. Legend has it that the last time he was well was in high school. He was quite the big man on campus at the time and married early. No surprise there, he was a magnificent sight, even in the deteriorated condition he was in when I met him. Any young girl, or boy for that matter, would have fallen all over themselves trying to get with him. He was a tall, emaciated string of knots now, but in the day I hear that he was a graceful mountain of graceful sculpture. He was a football player and track runner. He's intelligent, observant, and makes friends easy with a charm that makes him seem bigger than he is. He has always lit up any room that I was in, at least in part because of the love I feel for him. He didn't notice me as I waved, so I pulled over to the curb. I guess I was about 2 blocks behind him. And I was going to get out and speak with him because I missed him and I hadn't seen him in a while. But I stopped myself because as I sat there watching him walk away, I realized how sick he is and how miserably I have failed to help him out of his unfortunate life a decade ago. At that moment, sitting there in my car, I felt kind of sad for both of us. Him for the life that he has to live because of the politics of addiction, and me because, try as I might, I was never enough to him to be of any real help. To his credit and mine, I suppose, when we were together, he was making some real effort to deal with this disease, but that was 10 years ago. Later that night, I was flipping through the channels when I came upon a documentary about Billy Preston. Those of you who were born post Beatles will probably not remember him, but he had a huge impact on my growth and development with an album that he did called I Wrote a Simple Song. His claim to fame was the nickname of being the fifth Beatle. He played keyboards on their last two albums and was likely the reason that they stayed together long enough to finish them. He also toured with the Rolling Stones as a sideman and was in Ray Charles's band. He was in Little Richard's band for years. At 9 years old, he was a guest on Nat King Cole's TV show and played piano for Nat while Nat sang. 9 years old. Okay, cut to even more years ago. I was 20 years old and I'm living in Phoenix, Arizona with about six others in a little 70s drug commune type of arrangement on West Solano Drive. I had just been to the record store and was clutching my prize close to my chest on my way home. I put the record on and dropped a particularly good hit of LSD, laid down on my waterbed to listen. Somewhere near 9 hours later, my roommates burst into the room and demanded that I change the record. I fell in love with Billy Preston on that day. What I felt and still feel when I listen to that record is a kind of fun, joy, excitement, and a little bit of stirring in my crotch, too. He was a sexy man. I'll spare you the intimate details, but let's just say it's possible to have an orgasm without touching yourself. To this day, I'm grateful that that didn't happen while my housemates were bursting into the room to demand that I play something else for a while. It was one of those records like Brenda Russell's Piano in the Dark that once I heard it, I couldn't bear to listen to anything else for weeks. What I didn't know until that evening is that my hero, in addition to being a genius musician who played with the A-list people of his time, whom we now consider legendary geniuses, was also gay. Not many people talk about that, and it's unfortunate. Partly because guys like me, and it turns out Billy Preston himself, had to struggle so deeply with our sexuality and our self-esteem because no one was talking about it. We had to work that out on our own. There was nobody we could talk to. Looking back on that experience, I can't help but think that Billy Preston reached me so deeply because he was able to communicate through his genius in music that what I was feeling inside was not just okay, but an actual gift that not everybody gets to have. He was a kindred spirit, even though I didn't know it at the time, and it's clear now that he didn't know it either. I learned from the documentary that he struggled with being gay for his whole life because of his upbringing in the church. Wow, me too. As you know, all religions look down on homosexuality. When I was growing up, there was no such thing as a homosexual in the Catholic Church. We were straight people who were morally weak and needed to get us some Jesus and pray for our sins more. The people teaching us that probably meant well. They just learned it from the folks that came up before them, and they learned it from the people that came up before them, and so on down the line. They just didn't understand homosexuality, or were struggling with it themselves, perhaps. The documentary also talked about Billy's struggle with the same disease that my friend from earlier had, same one I have too with my cigarettes. However, somewhere inside of Billy Preston, coming out through his music, was the knowledge of how much a gift being selected to go through this life as a gay person really is. And I will always hold a special place in my soul for him trying to tell me about that on his album, I Wrote a Simple Song. Maybe he was trying to tell himself too, but it changed what I felt about myself on a subconscious level, if not a conscious one. And I hope it had the same effect on him. Looking back, it was around that time in my life that I stopped doing drugs and started looking at my life as if there was a future for me in addition to a past that I'd rather not revisit. And I believe to this day that album had some part in that discovery. I may not have realized it at the time, but another soul was reaching out to mine. And I learned from the documentary that he eventually, if too late, did settle with his sexuality and recovered from his addiction shortly before his unfortunate demise in 2006. I thought it was strange and maybe a bit of a signal about what had happened to me earlier while sitting in my car thinking about speaking with my friend who was sick, and then seeing this documentary about one of my personal heroes who suffered from the same disease. Here's what came up for me. I don't like crack. It's nothing personal. I just don't like it, and I've never had bad feelings about people who think that they do like it. I have some friends who have been doing it for years, and they're still my friends, and I still love them. Of course, I love them from a bit of a distance now because of some of the more unsavory symptoms of the disease, but I do love them still. I also have some friends who have done it and been able to recover, and I cheer for them inside. I consider it a blessing to have been there to see that happen for them. I just don't want it in my life because you don't even have to do crack for it to ruin big swaths of your life. Just being an innocent bystander is enough. If you're nearby, you're going to feel the effects of the symptoms of addiction. But addiction is not a criminal justice issue. It's a medical one. These people are sick, not criminal. Criminal activity is a symptom of addiction, not the cause. Most people who suffer from addiction commit crimes because they are sick, not because they're criminals. We're fighting a war with crimes that we have created by misunderstanding the nature of illness in general and the disease of addiction in particular. I favor legalizing all of it, even though I have little personal interest in doing drugs anymore, aside from my cigarettes, of course. We should be putting our money into treatment for a medical disease that is eating my friend alive. Our response to drugs destroys way more families and individuals than any drug could ever dream of. It's like our war on terror. We've done most of the destruction to our country ourselves by acting out our fears instead of our vision for peace or courage or healing. What also came up for me is this: religion is the single most devious force of evil in the lives of my fellow gay people. Probably everyone else too, but that's a discussion for another day. I can testify personally to that truth, and I can point to Billy Preston and any number of other heroes right here in my life who lived tragic lives of self doubt because someone in the church that they looked up to for guidance and direction in times of confusion told them that who they are as a person is evil and sinful in the eyes of God. I believed that lie because I was taught that I was supposed to. And that's the single biggest, most destructive lie I have ever heard. And it is still being told by good people who think they are speaking in the name of a loving God. Most of them are good people whose only fault is that they don't know any better. And lastly, what came up for me is that maybe my judgment was a little off back there when I let my friend with the trash can on his shoulder keep walking without stopping him to speak for a while. He's worth it as a human being, and I still love him and I miss him. Maybe I should have stopped him and tried again. It's 10 years later. He's surely been through a lot in that time. Maybe now, after all that, I might be enough to reach him like Billy Preston was able to do for me at what turned out to be a critical junction in my life. Maybe. And while I'm thinking of it, aside to Billy Preston, happy trails, my brother, and thank you for everything. Will it go round in circles? I certainly hope so, Billy. I certainly hope so. Sincerely, from Gregory Leon Franklyn, a kid you helped become a man. Much love.